Shalom, and welcome to this presentation on YHWH's Timekeeping Lights, the Sun, Moon, and Stars, Part 6, by Daniel Fuentes, servant of YHWH. Scriptural parameter number 3, Shemot Exodus chapter 13, verse 10. And you shall guard this law at its appointed time from year to year. Shemot Exodus chapter 13, verse 10. Verse 10, and you shall guard this law at its appointed time. Let us pay attention to that. Its appointed time from year to year. That is also powerful. This law is speaking of the commands for keeping the Pesach and Chag Matzoht, Passover and Feast of Unleavened Breads. This is seen in Shemot Exodus chapter 13, the same chapter, verses 4 through 7. You can see that for yourself. So this obviously shows the association between the Pesach, Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Chag Matzoth, and knowing that you're keeping it at its appointed time. It's letting you know this not just whenever you want to. It's an appointed time. You have to understand what that means. I believe that is alluding to the Aviv, knowing that you wait. You wait for it. And also, let's pay attention to this end part of the scripture that says from year to year, because this is an important parameter. This is scriptural parameter number 3 that we will make sure that we keep. At its appointed time is referring to the Chodesh, renewed moon of Aviv, which ensures that Pesach and Chag Matzoth happen in spring, not in winter or any other season. And we know that that is so because we counted the 364-day solar year that began in the spring. Remember, the order of the seasonal divisions is part of the 52-week, 364-day solar year. So the determining of the Chodesh, renewed moon of Aviv, is subject to the commands for the 364-day solar year. That's the important thing we have to do. You remember, the moons, the 12-month lunar year, is trying to align with the 12-month solar year. That's what we have here. It's the moons are subject to the solar year. The Almighty already has the perfect 364-day solar year with the 4 seasonal divisions in order. They can't be disturbed. These moons have to align with that. Now, this is very important. From year to year means there's only one Pesach, Chag Matzoth, per 364-day solar year. Some people don't understand this. This scripture does not say twice in a year. Remember, the unstable 354-day lunar year is not the same as the faithful 364-day solar year being referred to in this scripture. So, this is something to be considered by those who keep a strictly 12-month lunar year, which is 354 days. You have to understand that. This is saying that you're to keep it from year to year, meaning you don't keep 2 in 1 year. This year you kept Pesach Chag Matzoth, the following year you keep Pesach Chag Matzoth. When you understand what the 364-day solar year is, it will keep you from making that error of choosing a Chodesh and calling it the first Chodesh Aviv of the year when it's still in the winter season. And we'll prove that when we count the 364 days. Fragments of scripture, including Chanok and Yovelim, were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. These versions predate the Ethiopic versions, the translations that the Ethiopians have. This Israelite community, whose writings were found in the caves of Qumran, observed a 364-day solar year. They used calculations of lunar months, but applied the Moedim solely to a solar year. Now, I personally find that to be an error. I've studied this, And I find that they were keeping a 364-day solar year, which I agree with, and yet they had a practice of using the lunar months in a calculated manner, and they were not using them for the Moedim. They were doing strictly solar, and like many do in our time. This practice of rejecting the renewed moons for the application of the Moedim is contrary to the scriptural findings of this servant's teaching, and I've already proven that in this presentation thus far, that the Almighty has used the word Chodesh and Chodeshim, speaking of renewed moon months, and that we have to obey that. This community's writings show they always ended their 364-day solar year on the third day of the Shabbat week, of the 7-day Shabbat week, and started the new solar year on the subsequent fourth day of the same week. Now that is very interesting. This practice has preserved the weekly 7th-day Shabbat and the start of the 364-day solar year. Now, because of them beginning their 364-day solar year on the fourth day of the Shabbat week, it preserved us knowing when is the 7th-day weekly Shabbat, and it's proven that the Shabbat that we keep in our time in this day is the same one that they kept. The Shabbat that these Israelites preserved is the same one that Yahushua, his taught ones, and the Yahudim of the first century Common Era also kept. Beginning the sun's annual course on the fourth day of the Shabbat week has scriptural support in Bereshit, Genesis, chapter 1, verses 14 through 19, when the sun was created and began its annual course. And we're actually going to test this practice of interpretation of this scripture when we count the 364-day solar year. We're going to do the same thing that they did. They interpreted Bereshit chapter 1 verses 14 through 19 to mean that they're to begin their 364-day solar year on the fourth day when the sun began its course there in Bereshit. And we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to test it, that same interpretation of that same scripture. Thank you for joining me for part 6 of this teaching. We found that the Almighty Yah commands that only one Pesach, Chag Matzoht, are to be kept per year in the 364-day solar year. We found some evidence among the Dead Sea Scrolls that the community of Qumran, they were using a 364-day solar year, and that they always began the reckoning and the counting of that 364-day year on the fourth day, Yom Revi'i, of the Shabbat week. And we found that they were using an interpretation of Bereshit chapter 1, which speaks of when the Shemesh, the sun, began its course. Here are some references that were used in part 6 of this teaching. I hope you'll join me for part 7 of this teaching.